Please join me in welcoming Senior Developer Advocate at AWS, Cobus Bernard, to the show. Cobus, oh my God, my cheeks are, we didn't even get started.
I haven't even started with the dad jokes yet. That's the worst part.
Yeah, this is too cool. All right, today we're talking about Terraform, content creating, and a balance of AWS services. And does AWS sunset services? I don't know if we're going to answer that question fully here on the show because that's a very touchy subject. We might avoid it in general, but we do have some topics for that. First of all, Cobus, let's get a little backstory on yourself and let everybody know that you're in Seattle after a very challenging trip during the holidays. All right, let's get to it.
Okay, let's start with that. Let's call it a fun little adventure. So effectively, as part of my team move internal to AWS, I'd also decided to relocate to Seattle because just a lot of things made sense with the teams here and recording studios availability, etc. So what I thought was going to be a simple process: you apply for your visa. AWS has companies that help you with that. You go to the embassy, you get your visa, you book your plane ticket, pack up your house, and you come over. That's how it's supposed to work, except there was this little thing that got in the way called COVID. So pro tip, don't try and move during the middle of COVID when multiple countries are on lockdown. So then what happened is, obviously, it was hard getting an appointment at the embassy in South Africa to go for the visa appointment because they were still closed. So Mauritius actually opened up. So we flew there for a few days, nice little like beachside island holiday, which was quite a lot of fun, but still managed to get an appointment there, got in there, then went back to South Africa in November last year. Then it was also supposed to be very simple. We had booked a flight for middle December to fly from Cape Town, Amsterdam, Seattle, all booked, paid, no issues, no worries. Then the government,
now the fun begins.
Yeah, now it gets like, and it's a hilarious like series of, or what do we call a comedy of errors, which is the first one being is that's around the time when the South African government announced the Omicron variant. But then 2 days later, they also published data where previously we had about, let's say, 800 cases a day, new cases. Then suddenly 2 days later, we had a spike of 18,000 new cases. So the whole world went like, holy crap, hell no, let's not let people fly out of the country. So effectively, a lot of the countries went in lockdown and said you can't fly there directly. Now, the funny part there is that it was just old data, and the way the system worked is that there's no way for them to historically add that into the old one. So they just said, okay, well, let's do summation and just pop them in as a single day. Obviously not a good thing, because guess what? This was at the end of November. I think on the 24th this happened. We're supposed to fly mid-December. So clearly we can't get to the US because you have to be outside of the country for 14 days. So we're like, okay, no worries. Let's go to Kenya. It's one of the closest countries. We don't need a visa for it, so it's fairly simple. So we go to Kenya for 14 days, and we fly a little bit earlier, which pushed up the date for packing the house, which was fun. We're still unpacking boxes, and we're like, why did we ship this crap? We should have just gotten rid of it. But yeah, some container joke to be made here as well. Get to Kenya.
That's all I want to go.
Yeah, get to Kenya. Everything's on schedule, no problems until the day we fly. So we get to the airport, and it's a flight. At that point, it was Nairobi, Amsterdam, Seattle. Once again, very nice and simple. So we try to book in, and they're struggling with the system. We kind of like, we don't understand what the issue is. And it turns out at the same time, Seattle was having a blizzard. So the flight from Amsterdam to Seattle had been canceled. They don't tell us this, but they say, okay, cool, listen, here are your tickets to get to Amsterdam. No, wait. That one was cancelled. The Amsterdam flight was cancelled, so they rerouted us to Paris at that point. So we're like, don't worry, get to Paris. They'll get you issue your ticket to Seattle from there. Don't worry. So obviously at this point, I'm like a little bit like, something's going on. Airlines don't do this. I've flown a lot. You get your tickets if everything is kosher. So let's go ask around and start looking. And I see that flight had already been cancelled. So I'm like, there's no way we're going to get there. So I started obviously figuring out alternative flights. So I found one that goes Paris, Vancouver, Seattle, which is great. So that's fine. We get to Paris. They tell us, sorry, you can't do that because remember, you need a visa for Canada because I'm from South Africa. I'm like, okay, cool. How do I do that? No, don't worry. There's this online form. It takes 10 minutes. Just fill it out quickly. I try to fill it out. Sorry. Okay. South Africa's on a list of countries that cannot do the electronic visa. You have to do a written one that takes 3 months. I'm like, oh, crap. So finally, Delta Desk support person helps me and finds a flight to LA. Once again, with a don't worry, we'll get you to LA, and then to LA, we'll get you to Seattle. We've got a ticket by the time you land, it's sorted. Get on the plane, get to LA, try and catch the next flight. It shows up not on the Delta app for a second, but only on the KLM app based on my loyalty program. So I'm like, I see there's a flight. Go ask, how do we get tickets? And they're like, oh, no, that flight's canceled. And by the way, we can't see your ticket. So I'm like, okay, fine. When's the next one? So we book it for, this was Sunday. So we book it for the Wednesday morning. Tuesday night, they canceled that one. So we book for Friday. Thursday, they canceled that one. So we finally book on Saturday and arrive in Seattle on the 1st of January. After spending a week in LA with just our carry-on luggage with 2 young kids, 2 and 4.
Okay, I don't really know where to start with all this. When did you start your journey, and how long did it take?
We left South Africa 11 December, and we arrived in Seattle 1 January.
Wow, definitely a challenging experience, especially over the holidays, no less, and with everybody else traveling and all the restrictions.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Wow, I think we should end this show on that. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, wow.
Now that everyone's depressed about trying to fly.
Well, they've gotten a lot better. I'll tell you that. No, I can't say no issues. I haven't had any. I've been doing a number of flights, and I haven't, but I didn't go from country to country to country. And I don't know how challenging that is, but I can imagine not only for you and your wife, but with the kids as well. Everybody survived. Everybody's doing good. And now you got an awesome story to tell.
Oh, yeah. Including like how to drive on the wrong side of the road, which according to the rest of the world is the right side.
Well, it is the right?
But it's the wrong according to me, because the left side is the right side.
I don't think you're right.
Nope.
Okay. So, Cobus, let's talk about a developer advocate at AWS, and then I want to jump into Terraform because I think they lead into each other, and also some of the work that you're doing. What do you do? I mean, what is a developer advocate? I've had so many on my show. The stories range from everything, but the character really speaks for themselves and what they do and how involved they are in the community.
Yeah. So effectively, my role changed because initially I was the developer advocate for Sub-Saharan Africa, and I think last count it was 57 countries, which, as you can imagine, is an interesting one to try and cover. So my approach there was to see how much I could do online and in digital form for people to consume, but then that's impersonal. You get very little feedback often with that. So I also did a lot of in-person events. So I went to Ghana, Kenya, Nigeria, Zambia, I think. Nigeria I went twice as well, just for local conferences and some events. And then while there, I would do meetups with things, because the aspect with developer relations is that it's not a one-way conversation or a broadcast system where you just go like, here's the info, use this. Where it's a conversation, because you need to understand what are the developers and other technical builders trying to accomplish and do, and how do they approach it. Because one of the interesting things with Africa is that if you look at, for example, let's say a SaaS product or subscription service, that's, let's say, 50 or $100 a month. That in US terms is like, for a company, it's like, yeah, that's not too bad. For a weak currency, that's like, okay, no, we're going to build something ourselves because this is way too expensive. So the whole approach is a lot different when you look at that. Then obviously also in regional areas, they've got different ideas about how to build systems. So you need to take that into account. So it's a case of getting that feedback and then figuring out like, how do you show people to build? And the important thing there is to build the trust with them, because we are not sales reps. We are not, gold against how many sales leads that we create. We really hate that approach. So what we want to do is we want to show people how to build on AWS or just technical solutions of some kind, and then help them in their journey and understand what their use cases are, how they go about it. And then also, as people are working on AWS, gather that feedback and feed that back into the service team saying, listen, we've had a bunch of people saying this, that isn't clear, or when working with this one, there's this use case that we just can't do with the service. We have to like do this whole workaround to address it.
Having any sales or leads tied to a developer advocate is definitely the wrong approach. If you ever find a role that has that, walk away, because here's what's happening. And I'm not only speaking for the developer advocate role. There are roles that require that. That's fine. But you are building trust. You're talking with the community and the customer feedback. And having that trust is key, because they trust your knowledge. They trust your understanding that you have their best interests, to not only show them the right path, but educate them on some of the things and bring that information back. If you're tied to certain sales, what's ultimately happen, it's really a self thing. You're trying to do the best for yourself, and it's not customer obsessed.
Yeah. No, that's very true. And the one part you touched on there is the technical experience and background portion of that. So for myself, I started off as a normal backend developer using Java and Linux, then flipped over to the complete opposite, which is C# and Windows, then flipped back to Java, then we did like a fun little roller coaster of mobile and starting to like do sysadmin work, managing firewalls and file servers and things that work while I did programming, and then ultimately landed on what's now called DevOps, and then turned to consulting for that, to help companies basically onboard to AWS, automate, do things faster. And part of that whole long journey was like seeing these things that people are interested in, not interested in, want to do, and what are the common problems they face. And that's also kind of like when my whole Terraform journey started.
Oh, Terraform. Before I get to Terraform, I've got a question for you. You started Linux, then went to Windows. What? Wait, why? Who does that? First of all, which one do you prefer?
It was actually even worse than that, because I'd only known Windows my life. I knew about Linux systems. I played around with them a little bit, but in no way did I actually use it on a daily basis or knew how to run it. And then the company I was working at was very heavy on Linux, and we actually used Gentoo. And for those not familiar with Gentoo, that's the one where part of the build system downloads the source code. You have to set the build flags, and manage like package dependencies if there are problems, and then compile it and then run it. So I went from, I think it was Windows, I want to say Windows 98 at that point, or Windows XP. Went from Windows XP to trying to run a desktop on Gentoo. And I still remember when KDE 4 came out, I was like, okay, I'm going to do this right now. I'm going to take the first release of a major release without patches. Let's build this. It took me, I think, 2 days to compile everything, and then another week just before I could see my desktop, which was very interesting.
Okay, I thought you were going to say you went from Windows 98 to ME. That was
No. We don't talk about ME.
I owned it. I had it once. Gateway computers. Okay, we will get to Gentoo. It really sounds like a preamble to containers, to Kubernetes. You had to download and apply all the packages and all the things that you needed in order to run. I wonder where they got the idea. All right, let's touch on Terraform. Why Terraform? Honestly, what is the value of it? Not only for you to jump into it, but what is the value you are seeing for others utilizing it?
Yeah. The biggest value there for the road that I've traveled is that Terraform isn't just for managing infrastructure as code for your big cloud providers, because they've split it into, they've got a provider for AWS, a provider for the other big clouds. They also have a provider for other services, for example, GitHub, Chef. So I had played around with, firstly, just a bunch of bash scripts to set up Route 53, cheapest, I think in 2011 is when I started on AWS systems. It worked great until I had to make a change. And I'm like, oh crap, now I have to go edit the script, but I can't reuse the script, and that just didn't work. So I started looking around what are the other alternatives, and then started playing with CloudFormation in, I think, 2012-ish somewhere. Big blob of JSON. At that point, I'm going to blame CloudFormation, because obviously I was young enough, and it was definitely not me for putting every single resource in a single stack. Can't be me. Yes, I have
been there, done that. Yep. It was simple, 1,000 lines. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh yeah, and then you hit the 51 KB limit at that point, and you have to now figure out like, how the hell do I split this without breaking production? So, any case, that was like, obviously my brain doesn't work with this, so I moved on to Ansible for infrastructure creation. That actually went quite well for about 4 or 5 months, until I got to a point, once again, everything single stack, single role, and I started making typos in Python. And Python has this lovely thing with Ansible. If you didn't watch carefully, you would see this like pink purple message pop past that says undefined variable, but it happily continues. So I may or may not have broken production. I will not confirm that. With that, and I tried to fix it. So I'm like, okay, fine, let's fix it. Then 3 days later, I did the same thing. And it's like, I got to a point where like, I keep breaking things. This is just not working. It has to be something else. So I started looking, and I found Terraform. And for me personally, Terraform just clicked. It's just the way my brain works, where you define your resources. It figures out, what the delta is between what you want, what the previous state was, and what it currently sees as the world in whatever system you're using. And it was also great because I'd implemented a Chef for config management and server provisioning at that point, and then figured out you can use multiple providers. So our developers are part of our GitHub org. They have individual profiles. They can manage their own public SSH keys. I can pull from there with Terraform and then push it into the Chef servers, and the Chef servers would then deploy it on our EC2 instances for SSH access to the Bastion. So that was kind of like, this is quite neat. And it just worked. Like I said, the fact that you could do a preview using the plan function and actually see what you're going to change, and it would warn you, I'm going to tear down this database. That was super useful, trust me. It's like one of those, like, I haven't dropped the database since. Not that I've ever done that, I promise.
The mishap to production, not once,
Oh
but
yeah.
twice. You've probably learned, or it sounds like kind of a DevOps has kind of come into prospect there, where you're utilizing and doing some tests ahead of time. And in fact, it sounds like Terraform has allowed you to integrate more of a DevOps type culture where they can see the entire plan, that walkthrough. I love the speed, the flexibility of Terraform, and that you don't need to know your provider, or it's kind of in a generic thing, the variables or implement. You don't have to rewrite everything.
Oh yeah.
Just to utilize it and spin it up, or have to call out every single little step. I mean, you could take 1,000 lines of code and trim it down to like 200 and still get the same thing done.
Yeah. And then you start building modules as you figure out the patterns for things. You add, like, combine things. So at one company I was helping with doing consulting, we would set up a module for individual services. They were using containers. So it would provision the whole build pipeline for the container, push it into ECR. Then there's a deployment part of it. Then it would hook in Datadog for the monitoring, add it to the relevant dashboards, make sure the chef configs are there, etc. So I just found that, like, that's super powerful. Everything is code. You can shield the developers from this by providing these templates to them, and they're happy. And then when you want to upgrade, you focus on the module and what needs to change, and then just slowly roll it out through the different environments.
I like all the additional add-ons that they put out there, and integration, GitHub, Docker, like they thought of, all right, hey, you know what? You need a plugin. You need a plugin. Let's get all these set up so that you can do your full infrastructure as code deployment without having to worry and write your own code that says, okay, let's pull the API for this and then integrate it into the whole structure. For somebody looking to get into Terraform, right, and understand it, what's your recommendations?
Well, I can do a little self-promotion there. I did do 5 videos on it on YouTube a while back. It's like on my top of my list of content I want to create again. And yes, I'll give a link for it. It's literally just short ones giving you an overview and helping you get started. And I've done like a talk at Hashi Talks, a regional one in Africa, about how to set up a multi-environment one, where the approach there that I see online often is people tell you to build like your infrastructure in modules, and then you have like either a repo per environment or you have a folder per environment. And that then relies on you copy pasting as you, let's say, promote different infrastructure changes to different environments, which once again, there are humans involved in this. And I know myself, and I wouldn't trust me to do that, which means someone is going to make a mistake at some point. So my approach there was a little bit different, where because you've got the variables inside Terraform that you can utilize, you can actually externalize them into variable files. So what I would do is have a variable file per environment that you then specify with the CLI, which end for your environment you're dealing with. And then effectively the environments are exactly the same. The only thing that changes is the configuration of the infrastructure. So do I spin up 3 web servers for production or 1 for development? And do I go for like a large database of production versus a small one, or a large one that's also high availability and replicated? And those are all just then variables that you set on an environment level, which was very, very useful and powerful, until I got to the point where I had to start working with workspaces, because then someone did the dev environment with a production workspace, and that led to a little bit of fun. But as with all problems, nothing you can't solve with a bash script or a makefile. So built a little makefile that then you specify the environment you're dealing with as a variable to the makefile, and it automatically ties the variable file to the workspace in Terraform. And that kind of solved it, at least until someone upgraded their Terraform version. I had to deal with that. So I built in MD5 brute force checks for what binary are you dealing with. And if you don't have the right one, sorry, I will not run.
Oh, so you brought in some error checking. I like it. I like the integration for it. Here's a challenging question for you. AWS has CloudFormation, right?
Yes.
How are you, senior DA, talking about Terraform, and why not CloudFormation?
It's what I use the most. It's one of those things where use the tool that works for you, and we're not going to tell you, listen, a lot of people use Terraform, thou shalt not use it because you are using AWS. And my friend and effectively brother from another mother, Darko, because we look the same, you should definitely get him on as well.
Wait a second. You're not watching my podcast. I already had him on, man.
I have
awesome.
not. Sorry. I'm not traveling a lot at the moment. The school commute is 5 minutes, so I don't get to do podcasts anymore. It really sucks.
It's all good.
But in any case, Darko's got this fun one where, because we did a stream for a couple of months together, where his favorite answer is if someone asks you, should you use CloudFormation, CDK, or Terraform? He would just go, yes.
I like his answer. That's pretty good. And that's true, Darko. In fact, I had him on there. We actually did a quick video and a recording at the DC Summit with Jackie, and he had on the cool Jeff Bezos shirt.
Oh, yes.
I love his humor. Yes. Having the two of you, you know what? I think the two of you on a show sometime, this is going to be entertaining.
I'm not sure we could do that, because remember, that'll prove that we are actually not the same person.
I don't know how proof it is, because it's still virtual, right? I mean, I could be like, it could be two separate recordings cut into it, right? So it's not really proof.
No, but I mean, it's one of those like super amusing things, because we were both on the EMEA DA team. He was focused on Central Eastern Europe, and I was obviously Sub-Saharan Africa. And people on our team, so you work with them on a daily basis, would once or twice, not often, they would confuse the names, which sometimes happens, but that's fine. But the funniest part was they would confuse an attribute work to the wrong person. So they would ask me about Darko's streaming stuff, or say, thanks for that video you did. I'm like, that's not me.
How awkward. Well, I'm glad, but you both are in Seattle now.
Yeah, he also moved to the North America team end of last year. So he arrived here in November. I got here in December, because you have to follow your heart. You can't let them escape.
Okay, wait a second. So you guys are following each other. You're in the same state. You're in the same area. So you might be one in the same.
I don't know.
All right.
Can't prove it.
I cannot confirm or deny, right? Let's talk about content creating, because you create a lot of content for Terraform, for AWS. Let's talk about your process of content creating and how you go about it.
Oh, that one is a fun one, because my role has actually shifted a little bit, where currently I'm focusing on the content strategy. So it's like, how do we go about creating content at scale and dealing with that? And I think the first part obviously is, and the most important one is, start with a use case and what are people trying to do. So figure out like what it is you want to show them or teach them. Don't just go, hey, I've got a great demo to do X, Y, and Z. Now, how do I get people to watch it? Because that's the wrong approach. The whole point here is it ties back into the whole DA role and building trust with people. Is like, you need to speak to them like a fellow human and effectively show them what it is they're trying to do, or something cool that you know how to do, and also explain why it solves a problem. Because once again, too often you see, especially in startups, sometimes building a solution, and then once they've got it built, they start looking for, okay, what's the problem this is going to solve, and convincing people there's a problem. Which is so much easier if you go like, hey, I've dealt with struggling to get my infrastructure between the different environments up to speed and keep it up to date and make changes without breaking things. Now, when I come along and say, listen, I've got this cool way with Terraform to show you how to build across multiple environments with just a pipeline to handle that. It's quick, the test, low level of error. Then they're going to go, oh, I want to listen to this. So that's normally the first step, is figure out like, what does you want to talk about? And it's like, what is the pain point?
Okay, I got one word. Or is it two words? Working backwards.
Oh, yeah.
That's exactly what you're doing, right?
Yeah.
So you're working backwards from the customers. In fact, I've worked for a number of startups and companies, and they like, oh, we got this awesome product. We need you to promote it. All right, cool. Who are your customers? Who did it solve? Can I talk to the customer? Oh, we don't have them yet. Oh, well, I'm not promoting it, because you might get one person that's interested in the possibility. But do you ever notice that when somebody built a product without being informed from the customer aspect, that when the product goes out, either it falls flat or customers are using it for what it wasn't intended to be used for?
Oh, that second part is probably the most common one, is like, customers are exceptionally creative. And they will find ways to use products. And I mean, I've done it in the past as well, where I use something completely not intended for that. I think the best example that I know currently of is Jeff Gerling. He's very active in the Raspberry Pi and community, and does a lot of videos of things. Is he actually uses Ansible and templates in Ansible to generate his wiki pages in GitHub to link to his individual projects. So effectively Ansible for building web pages, which I don't think was in the spec originally and the plan, but he does it and it works for him.
Sounds very efficient. What about some other content creating aspects? Now, you talked about how to grow and scale content in
Mm,
your new role, right? But you're still creating content, but you have more of that education, that knowledge on who's consuming the content.
yeah.
So how do you go about it?
Very, very slowly and very difficultly because it's hard, especially when we throw the at scale one. If I have to operate in a like a on my own without taking anyone else's content into consideration, it's fairly simple. I can go work on what are the things I know a lot about and figure out what the use cases are for people out there and what they're interested in. So I would go and create videos on Terraform because I saw people were interested in that. I can go and do a webinar on how to build containerized microservice architectures, decide how I want to split that up, which services to use, because I like them, and create the content. Very simple. It gets a lot more complicated when you start thinking like, how does this content landscape look at, over, let's say, the properties we have? We sort of have to think about there's already this content that does exactly that with ECS, for example. But here's another one that shows you how to do that with EKS. Oh, by the way, here's another one that shows you how to do that with just EC2 instances. And how do we then figure out like telling people this is how you can do it, but then giving them the guidance? So that's the more important part that I want to try and focus on at the moment, is like, because there's so much, but this, or have you thought about that? And the classic dev answer to any question is, well, it depends. Building that nuance. And what compounds that problem is I've been at this now for, I think, almost 20 years. So I've got a lot of historic knowledge, and I can't remember how I learned. Well, I can remember obviously the sequence of events, but if I have to go now with the large landscape of, if you look how open source has exploded with all the different, just for example, JavaScript front-end frameworks and other projects and approaches and build systems and things, you kind of go like, how does someone who knows nothing get into this and start building that overall view of what are the components? And once you have that view, drill into specific ones to know what they can do. And then deeper, even being able to understand the trade-offs and figure those out. So yeah, I'll let you know when I one day figure that out, and then retire very rich.
I can see this. You the EC2, ECS, EKS, right? So you have all these things, and you're like, well, you can do it. Well, it depends. I
Yeah,
love that answer, by the way.
yeah.
It's a very classic kind of answer. Well, depends on what you're trying to achieve. That's an actual honest question or answer, but how are you kind of displaying it to them? But at the same time, are you empowering developers to come up with their own ideas? Like, hey, here's how we use it, but here's a suggestion, and then let them run with it. And the reason I'm asking that is because, are you seeing more companies basically show how things are done, but showing some capabilities and now letting them run with it, like the open source market, or letting them build and add on to it?
Um, that's definitely a good way of doing it, because part of that challenge is, let's say a company has decided to do it a one way and it actually hits that sweet spot of perfect balance between complexity and solving the problem, which is kind of what you're aiming for. Others are going to look at that who have technical knowledge and say, you know what, that's a great approach. Let's start duplicating it. So that then it starts propagating through the industry. Obviously, there's a delay in any kind of new information in the industry, how people do things. And then it becomes very hard if you, let's say, decide that that's not the right way of doing it, to actually go and change that. So having them run, it's better than to figure out like, how do I work with them or with that content and showcase some extra like gotchas or edge cases, what ifs that people have to do it, kind of like try and steer people to a slightly different direction if that's what you try and do. Just to show them, hey, listen, this is great up until this point, but thereafter you're going to have the following pains, to help guide them with that. But I mean, I think ultimately it's effectively what works, until it breaks, and that's normally where people learn. So I love to say it's like, I'm an expert in many things, and I'm an expert because I can tell you all the ways to break it. And it's also actually one of my favorite interview questions is like, if I chat with a developer or DevOps person or sysadmin, it's like, I ask them, hey, listen, tell me about the last time something went wrong, didn't work the way it was supposed to, and it broke something, and how do you go about figuring out what was wrong and fix it? Because typically, if you can't tell me how you fixed it or found the problem, it kind of indicates you may not have actually worked on that and someone else fixed it. Whereas if you tell me, well, I was using X, Y, and Z, I found in the docs that that part was wrong, or I'd implemented this incorrectly and then I fixed it that way, that tells you, okay, cool, I get a good idea of your technical skills and capabilities.
Oh, I actually like that interview question. I know we're jumping on another topic of interview questions, but so I think I'm going to keep that, and I want to write that down because I like that a question. The reason I do is because you tell me if you're going to learn and be curious, right? And I hate to use the Amazon term. No, I don't hate to use it. I love it.
Oh,
So you right, because here's what happens as a developer, as somebody who likes technology, you're going to jump in there. And
yeah.
you are as a technical person. All right, I gotta switch gears. I gotta ask you a question. This just came ahead. How many times do you read the documents before trying something out?
Only if the CLI tool or autocomplete of something in my system doesn't work and I can't find a name that matches normally. It's like typical dev. I go in like head first, let's start building, see how it works. And then only when something starts breaking, it's like, what's going on here now?
That's exactly anybody that is hands-on, the developer IT that likes technology, you will go in and play around with it and break something. There's your story for your interview question. Well, to be honest with you, I just went to the command line and just hit run and I took out production. Well, I learned that I should read the document first.
Or be careful what you select. So when I started my career,
Wait,
I done
this is going to be good.
This is a good one. So I did electrical engineering, got to like third or fourth year. I can't remember the mix of subjects I had finished at that point, but I just wanted to code. But it was one of the things where my grandfather's actually helping pay for the studies, and he was still old school. You know, what are these new computer fangled things? It's just a phase. It's not important. You need a proper career like engineering. And I just want to code. So effectively dropped out, went to just finish off a diploma at a local college, which did do coding and things like databases, except I learned SQL with paper and a pencil. Sorry, no pen, because you weren't allowed pencil because you weren't allowed to erase your answers in the page, and you had to do the indentation in everything on paper. So that's how I started. I'm prepared for this coding career. So day one was, here's your computer, set it up, get it going, figure out, look at the docs and things. Day two, I was given an interesting problem because I know SQL, which is we've got a database of about 500,000 users. We've got some kind of sign-up bonus that they can use for things, but we are seeing that people are abusing this. So I spent until about 2-3 o'clock in the afternoon writing this exquisite SQL script. The where clause was like this, figuring out like if you see this pattern in the emails, or if it's that kind of number formula in the names and everything. And I'd run the select multiple times to make sure that these are the right ones that I want to lock the accounts for. Perfect. Came to updating it, so change the top from select to update, and ran it. And I sat there for a second because firstly it ran really quickly, a lot faster than the select, which was the first warning, because updates tend to be slower. The second one was like the output at the bottom of SQL servers, I can't remember what the studio is called, was 500 something thousand rows affected. And I'm like sitting there going like, the select had 30,000. Oh shit.
Did you update your resume after this?
No. So the best part is I had locked out every single user in the database that way. So it wasn't, obviously immediately pinged the senior dev that was assigned to me, and I was like, hey, listen, how do I fix this? So it was a case of, okay, cool, let's sort out priorities, unblock everyone, because we already had the sign-up bonus problem, so just unlock everyone, and now let's figure out how we can start passing old logs and look at lost activity and those kind of things. And that's kind of like where I learned, like, this log thing and an audit of events and actions that were taken in a system is kind of important. So yeah, I didn't get fired, which is great. But yeah, it was definitely a very fun day too.
I can see this. That is actually a good interview answer to your question. Here's what I learned. One, don't select start. No, I'm just kidding.
No. The first lesson is don't give the new hire that has never done programming production access on day 2. I think that's the core reason.
Well, actually, nowadays in DevOps, that's pretty much what you do, because you have an extensive pipeline for testing and everything. But if you're just on day 2 and don't know the processes, yeah, I think you might want to hold back a little.
That little bit in there of like you have a testing pipeline in place is a fun one, because I don't know if you know, but did you know that every single company with a product out there actually has got official testers for their systems? Some are just lucky that it isn't their customers.
Oh, that's like a mic drop. I'm out.
Yeah. No, so I can't remember where the quote comes from. It's definitely something. I almost want to say it's Charity Majors from a talk she did in 2013 around. I think about that time where I heard that one. It's like, that's like when you start, the penny drops, like Yes, we need to obviously check before our customers, because the last thing you want is the customer to come back and say, listen, this is broken. And that's how you learn.
Customer obsession. Going back to content creating, what do you find challenging during the process? Because we're going to get some Amazon interview questions here at the end that I want to ask a little more specifics on. No, I'm not asking you an interview question. Actually, we should do a loop on the show. No, don't worry. I'll bring on Darko. He'll be, you know. Okay.
That could be quite fun.
What do you... Wow, that seems like another podcast for testing the loop process. All right. Anyway, we're getting off topic. What do you find challenging around creating content, or basically fun? I mean, you might find it as a challenge process, but it's one of the things that you enjoy.
Typically, I don't find content creation difficult as such. The reason is, like, I only take on content that I've got experience in, and secondly, I'm excited about. So there is some tech that I've used in the past that I don't think I will, want to be excited about or want to do a talk about. So, and that comes across. Like, if I'm doing a talk on something that A, I'm not familiar with, or B, I'm not excited about, the audience will know.
Yep.
They will pick that up. So it has to be something where you can literally hear me start talking faster and faster, and then going like, "Ooh," and then you can do this, and then you can do that, and then and I have to look back at my sticky that says "speak slower," which I have on my screen.
So wait a second. Does that mean you're getting excited about talking at this podcast? Woohoo! Passionate. Woo! Check one.
I love just geeking out and talking about tech. It's one of the things that I think in my career, the initial part is I didn't do a lot of meetups and things. I didn't even know about meetups and anything about, day-to-day work and the people you had work off. There was obviously, and yes, I'm giving away my age now, there was some IRC channels where you could chat on, and then later on, we became friends with people. You had personal ICQ message you could share with them. But yeah, there weren't a lot of people.
There's some throwbacks.
Oh yeah, I don't have an active ICQ anymore, but I still have my number somewhere. I must actually check if it works.
Somebody's going to bring it back. You know that all of us older folks who have that information still and saved it, it's coming back. I think you mentioned passionate about and knowledgeable on the subject. I think they go hand in hand, because first of all, I'm passionate about a lot of things, but knowledgeable on the subject, that's where the real passion comes out, and you start to speak and you totally geek out. I have to diverse here a second and jump onto another topic, only because one, you've touched on the things. I was on a pre-call for a person to join my recording, and I should have clicked record. 30 minutes. We were geeking out 30 minutes talking about each other's digital setups and recording and content recreating. And then they asked me like something. I'm like, wait a second. I got to show you. Let me show you this. And they're like, oh my God. I was like, it was probably the best. And the conversation I had in a pre-recording, I mean, it was amazing. If I would have clicked record, it would have been a whole entire podcast.
Oh yeah. No, it's you get those people, and those are the kind of people you want to create content and also have those conversations with. Because like I said, it's like, if you're not excited about the product, the content is going to be meh. And the second part I think that's important for content creation is to think about what content you want to create that actually adds overall value to the existing content out there. Because what I see a lot at the moment is there are so many courses on getting started with X, and then it's just the one thing, and then people take that and just regurgitate it a little bit and change it a little bit. Now, granted, there is a part there that says take what there is and improve it enough that people will want to consume it, and then they will find it and it'll start ranking. But effectively, it's don't just create because you can create, and there's already a lot out there. And that's why I did the Terraform stuff, because there were some videos and content out there, but I felt like it wasn't structured the right way. It was missing the point about why you're doing certain things, how to think about the little blocks, and how to progress through that, versus just, oh, here's how you set up everything step by step. Let's just go through the mechanics of talking about it.
I think that's very helpful. Here's a question. What if I run into a problem? So an example, you're trying to do something that has, let's say, not even Terraform, right? The other day I ran into an AWS SSO issue for the CLI, and way back in the day, you used to have to actually go out there, get the key, set it as a variable within, and then run your profile, call out the variable. It was a whole... And then AWS released like AWS config SSO, which is one of the best things I think they did. And I was like, oh my God, I got to share this with everybody. And I put together a 2 to 3 minute video on sharing it. Nobody asked me for it. What about that type of video and content?
That is definitely good. I mean, if you see something that you struggle with, you can't find an answer, that's actually a great point to, with a caveat, if you found a solution to it, that is decent enough that others want to use it. Example of this is that I was in a situation at some point in my career, I want to be very vague here, where we had deployment issues with Windows. And the only way I could get around all of the restrictions imposed was to set up Jenkins, and then the worker nodes. I would install the agent as admin on the specific Windows machines to actually then run the commands and deploy and do things to the machine instead of having some config management system, because they just wouldn't allow that. I couldn't use Chef because they would not allow me to open up SSH ports to the machines, or what I can't remember what the Windows equivalent of that was. But yeah, so it's like, yeah, make sure it's a solution that you don't want to teach that it will get a lot of people into bad situations, because I often see that too much. Is like, oh, just set up SSH, don't put a password on it, just use that, or just store the API keys in a text file over here. Nothing will go wrong ever. So I think that is the little caveat of, when you think of a solution and it does solve the problem, just take a quick step back and say, how can this potentially not be a good way of doing it? What can go wrong? Just because otherwise you perpetuate this way of using things. So your SSO example is a very good one. I still see content out there that tell you, for example, with Terraform, in your provider config, copy and paste your API key inside the Terraform file that's going to get committed to your repo. And that's like, no. We've moved way past that. No one should be doing anything like that anymore nowadays.
Almost like IAMA roles and access keys. We should be using roles instead of access keys for it, and attaching the role to the EC2 instance with the key. Back then, that was all the way that you had to do it, but we've moved to a more security model, and doing it and having your access keys in your Git repo. You're just asking for problems.
Oh yeah, if you really want to have fun, go generate a pair, and obviously just so that they're the right length, change them or revoke them and break them, and just commit them and see what happens. You'll firstly get a flood of like automated email systems telling you, hey, this is in there. Some people will pitch you products saying, we've got a vulnerability scanner or sensitive information scanner. Do you want to use this? And I can guarantee you at some point someone's going to try and use that within seconds of committing it. They've gotten so good with automation.
Oh man, I just want to test that out. I just want to test how many people are going to go try it, or put out like the EC2 instance, and when they finally get access, it does nothing. Yeah, that would actually be a good episode. So folks, today we're going to post our key. We're going to do it live and see how quickly we can get some reaction from them. Let's do it.
Oh yeah. No,
Okay.
it is very interesting.
Oh man, it's some tests we got to do. Some more podcasting ideas. Cobus, let me ask you a couple more questions before we wrap things up. And the questions are about Amazon interview processes. We're not going to get to sunsetting AWS services. Well, maybe another time. But for this time, we're going to talk about, I know we said we get to it, but this has been a very interesting conversation. And I think having folks know the Amazon interview process is key. You already touched on one of them that you and I assume you're an interviewer.
Yes.
You do a number of those. What are some tips that you can give folks to not only prepare for the interview, but even the loop process?
Okay. The big thing there is to understand basically how our process works. So Amazon as a whole is a data-driven company. And that means that our interview process reflects that. So what we're trying to do when we have the conversation with you is gather data points to substantiate a specific view. A good example of this is that I believe our interview process, we do reference checks to ensure that you did work where you say you worked, just to confirm that you're not lying to us. But we don't ask for references. The reason for that is a reference is subjective and it's not a solid data point. Because, for example, let's say Darko wants to go for a job and he's not in a good spot, or something went wrong. He is by no means a bad person. He's actually very awesome at his job. So bad example maybe. But let's say he wasn't a great person. He's trying to help a buddy out. You might give him a good reference, even though he's not that good. Which means that if we take that as a data point, it means that we can't use it because we don't know if it is accurate or not. So we don't even ask. And the second part of, and I think this is the one that often trips people up, is like, we've got a very specific format of asking the questions. And we would like you to structure your answer in what's known as the STAR format. So effectively build out what happened. So you start off with, what was the situation? Then the second one is, what were the tasks that were assigned to you? Then we go on about what actions did you take? And then ultimately, what was the result? And the fun one there is that, remember, we're looking for data points around how you think, how you solve problems, how you approach things. It doesn't have to be a positive example. So if something went wrong and you can tell us the final result was X, it was not a good one, there's likely going to be a follow-up question. So how do you approach it differently in future? because we all make mistakes. We're not expecting people to come in and say, listen, I've got a pristine record. I never dropped the database table in production. I don't want to talk about that type of scenario. I actually used that one as one of my examples in one of the questions I had to do.
How many times do people realize that's actually very true?
Oh, yeah.
This is not a made-up example. This is very true with validated.
It's true. I mean, if you want me to tell about everything that I did wrong in my career, there is a very long list of things I would do differently. I mean, I even got fired at one point. So yeah, it's been an interesting career. But yeah, doing something, the big thing there, the nugget is mistakes are not bad, but we do expect you to learn from them. And you need to show us how you approach it differently, explain that to us and show it. And also just remember, while it's Amazon, and I had this when I interviewed, like, oh, it's Amazon, it's that massive company. Oh crap. I mean, this is going to be like, we're all just people. It's a conversation. Ask questions back. Because that's one of the parts that I actually love the most about interviews, is that at the end we go, okay, cool. What do you want to know about Amazon? Let me tell you about it. Because I mean, I love working here. I really enjoy it. Obviously, as with any job, there are some things I like, some things I really dislike. But overall, it's still a lot of fun, exciting, and challenging. So ask me about those things so we can have a chat about that to see if you're interested in, what things excite you, what type of things you want to do, etc.
Cobus, I want to add on to that with your data points and an example that I used in a previous conversation. Since Amazon is a data-driven company, if you're going to say, and there's two parts to this. One, if you're going to say we, it's fine. We all work in teams, but be specific on I.
Yeah.
If you're not comfortable talking about yourself, get comfortable, because here's what you need to do. If you keep saying we, you can't differentiate between what you did as a team and what was your role in the entire project. And then I have one more point, but I'm going to let you comment.
No, but that one is so important, because that for me as well is very difficult, because my approach is like, we work together as a team, we get things done. I'm not a glory hog. I don't want to, be put on a pedestal like, ooh, look at what he did, that kind of thing. And it's very hard for me to kind of like brag about the things that I did. And it feels like bragging when you try and phrase the answer in that way. But in that case, be very specific and definitely clear up what it is you did in that project.
The other part I want to add, and I'll use YouTube as an example. If I say, like, I'm a social influencer on YouTube, I have so many views, it's awesome, I've increased them month over month. So what? If it doesn't pass the so what, then it doesn't matter. There's no data point on it. Now, if I told you that I'm a social influencer and in the last 6 months, I've increased up 100,000 views from 200 to 300,000 views and added 1,500 subscribers with an average viewer duration of 17 minutes. Shit.
Yeah, that's data.
That is solid data. I can prove that data. I can provide you that data. But now you realize, okay, what were some of the lessons you learned and how you did that? What was the results or changes that you made? Well, here's what I did is I've changed my podcasting style to more of a natural conversation like we're having now. It is completely unscripted, and I don't know what's going to come out of his mouth or my mouth next, but we have a lot of fun, good time, and we educate folks, entertain with the possibility of education.
Oh yeah, no, that's an important aspect, that one. And I know Darko always has that conversation with people that want to get into live streaming, is that it's a conversation. So we're not going to get on stage and just broadcast to the people, and we happen to do it as a live stream. And the second part is like, it has to have some element of fun and entertainment in there. You obviously want to teach people about things, but if it is not enjoyable, why do you even bother? There's so much content out there. I can easily go pick something where the person is excited and they make jokes and it's fun and it's informal. So why would I go to a stiff webinar if I don't have to?
Exactly. And webinars are a thing of the past. Podcast in a new way. You can still have an effective, I want to say, brand awareness during a podcast with even a slide or two is fine. I don't mind a slide or two with a premise, but it has to be a conversation. And don't sell me something directly. Tell me why it's valuable. If you start trying to sell me an existing product or service, I'm like, oh yeah, it's great.
And I think that's an interesting point with DevRel. If you, I've seen, like, just on Twitter and other places, the number of companies suddenly hiring for DevRel and spinning up departments. I think the penny has finally dropped that, guess what? Traditional marketing does not work on developers. Our day job literally is to sift through information and make judgment calls on what is and is not accurate and what it is. So we spot marketing a mile away. So yeah, it just doesn't work.
So Cobus, traditional tech marketing doesn't feel where it should be at with regards to developers. And the reason I say that is because here's what happens. Marketers know their job. They know how to do top of funnel, middle funnel. They know how to get leads. They know how to do all the aspects of it. But think about where they're trying to gear it towards: the C-level folks, the people who are buying. But developers are the ones who are actually buying. They might not be signing it, but they're the ones using the product. And they're the ones that are going to say, this is what we need. Now, if the C-level does end up buying something else, the developers might not using it. So now you're collecting dust.
Or they leave.
Well,
I've seen people
exactly.
leave about over technology choices.
Yep, exactly. That's why, and I'm going to reword it as traditional tech marketing fails to engage their audience.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really
definitely
key.
Yeah, it is. I mean, you literally have to, and I mean that point about the developers, it's becoming more and more common, and you can see it in a lot of the like reports and studies being done. Is developers are increasing the number of them making the technology choices at companies. If you look at year-on-year stats, more and more, because what people are finding is that when the developers know what they're talking about, they know why they want to use that product and what it solves for them and why it makes things easier, and also if it's reliable or not. Versus the slick marketing pitch for product X, and when you put it in, you realize like, holy crap, it's horrible.
Exactly. They're the ones who are actually going to be utilizing the product. I've noticed in uptake in developer advocate and DevRel roles that are available now. This is not something that was happening 6 months ago. Companies are realizing the community engagement and the involvement for it. Cobus, before I wrap things up, where are you going to be next? When can we see you next in person, maybe?
For the first time in 3.5 years at being at AWS, I will be speaking at reInvent, and I actually have a session on Terraform and things.
Terraform, is that really the title for it?
No. The title's a bit more fun than that, but we're not at a point yet where those are public, so I have to be apparently toe the line, they tell me.
Now that's an interesting way to do it. Oh, Cobus, thank you so much for joining me. This has been awesome.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this chat.
Wait, did you? You didn't sound entertained.
I don't know. Sorry, I just got a ping. I have to be very rude and run to a doc read.
Okay, well, hold on a second. Let me wrap things up. Because that wasn't really an exciting ending, man.
No, it wasn't. Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry, we can cut that part. I literally got the ping saying, like, listen, the doc's locked. Let's go.
Yeah. Okay. So, Cobus, thank you so much for joining me.
No, thanks very much. This was a lot of fun. And this is the kind of chat that I basically, if I could just have my days with this, talk about tech all day long and play with code, that would be like, my dream.
Awesome. Hopefully we'll have you back on the show with Darko. Everybody, Senior Developer Advocate at AWS, Cobus Bernard. Folks, my name's John Myer. Thank you for watching the John Myer podcast. Don't forget to hit that like, subscribe, and notify, because guess what? We're out of here.
Ding, ding, ding.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
All right, man.
Awesome.
I know you got to go.
Yeah.